everyone. Welcome to the Cackling Jack podcast with us, the Phantasmic Four. Let's do some little introductions. I'm Lindsay. Next is... Who wants to go next?
Oh, hi. This is Mike, coming to you live from the bosom of Seattle.
The bosom of Seattle. Okay, and this is Sherry, and I'm coming from the sweaty armpit of Savannah.
And I am Mackenzie, coming to you live from Buffalo, New York, and I'm researching what best white wine goes with liver.
Oh, a nice sweet Riesling.
I love Riesling. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so hopefully we all have our nice glasses of Chianti. Not Chianti, everyone. It's Chianti.
Yes.
And as you might have guessed, this week we're going to be celebrating Hannibalween by talking about Hannibal in all of his...
time of the year.
The most wonderful time of the year. I am decked out in my flower crown. You can't see me, but I'm looking on point. So we'll be talking about Hannibal and all of his glory, sophistication, devilry, and incantations. Incantations?
Incarnations. Incarnations.
Incantations is the next episode.
Right. So sit back, enjoy, and let's get started.
First, before I get into the movies, I just really wanted to just quickly talk about the books. Going back through them, despite the fact that they were written in different periods, the 80s and the 90s, they didn't age. They kind of had a timeless quality to them. I mean, Red Dragon could just as well have been written in the 80s as well as, say, the 90s, which I thought was actually quite surprising and a credit to the skill of Thomas Harris as a writer.
Yeah, it's been a very long time since I picked one up, and I think that Red Dragon was the only one I got to, but that is my fault, not Tom Harris's, or how interesting the background is. Had to basically...
Well, I think that's mostly due to Thomas Harris is one of probably the early instances I can think of actually using forensics as detective work in a novel. And forensics was really kind of in its infancy in the 80s before really booming in the 90s. So even the forensics used in Red Dragon, it's still acute enough that it could actually pass off as a book from the 90s.
Yeah. And techniques from the 90s, too. And ideas from the 90s. I think that, I don't know, the whole... The CSI franchise and everything that came after that, all the procedurals that obsessively use forensic science, and probably especially Dexter, is relevant.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yep.
That book was later, but I think trust in forensics was maybe at its height in the 90s. I don't know. But I think that's when, like, you could watch the X-Files and you're like, oh, blood spatter patterns and all the little light stuff they did when they weren't spaceships landing.
Yeah.
And you could still, like, absolutely trust that, you know, the truth was out there. I think skepticism about forensics is new, but trust in forensics was probably, you're right, the spirit is there of the 90s.
And as far as procedurals, you could actually go ahead and throw in Criminal Minds because profiling is a big part of the franchise as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of that's the whole basis between their relationship. Whoever the main character is and Hannibal. Whether you're talking about Will Graham or Clarice Starling. It's always about profiling that serial killer out there. And that, a lot of people kind of, who outside of the psychology community kind of see profiling as a slipshod sort of way of determining, or of tracking down a serial killer. So, and of course, I don't know if Thomas Harris, I don't know if his book led to the what's the word I'm thinking of? Led to the cliche of the, white male in his, in the middle of his career who's been attracted to medicine or, surgery in particular, and the field of psychology, who is also, a mass murderer. If psychopaths are drawn to that, or if that was already in place before he wrote the books. I wish I knew more about the history of psychology itself and how they're able to determine when they're doing psychological profiling.
It'd be.
What do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that too. The show Hannibal, you guys have. This is a revelation. Of course, I've gotten into it completely. Thank you guys so much for introducing me to it. And I think maybe one of the reasons I'd say that's the best use of the character, because it has time to show how he can hide in plain sight.
Especially with our first one, Manhunter, directed by Michael Mann, who was enjoying the success of Miami Vice at the time. And at times, it is very much that kind of flashy 80s kind of Miami Vice-ish, not quite Miami Vice's show. But there were also, I definitely caught hints of like a Dario Argento film in here as well. There were just certain shots and certain scenes that reminded me of that very particular style. Most specifically, there were two moments in particular. There was the one dream sequence with Will Graham dreaming of the victims, and the wife opens her eyes, and there's like shining lights. Then the other instance when Francis Dollarhide is holding the shard of mirror before he is about to stab the blind girl. Dollarhide sees his reflection in the blade and stops and cringes. So there is a lot of really great stylish moments. It's not just a very dated 80s affair.
Yeah, I think you focused in on something like, I guess all of these different things it's such a sensual subject, and it how you choose your sophistication. And I think that you're right to focus on the fact that Manhunter, which again, do we all agree that it's pretty damn good?
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Is that I guess maybe it's a Michael Mann thing, maybe it's the time, but it seems to find its sophistication like in eyes and in light. And we'll get into the food porn in the show later, but I think that's kind of that there's kind of a light and perspective porn in Manhunter. That's like, it's almost like someone's about to look through a chandelier and swoop down in an opera cape at any time, which is weird to combine that with everything else that Manhunter is, as a flashy 80s movie, like you said. But it is highly worth a watch.
And talk about a cast of people who were in this movie before they really got famous.
Yeah.
William Peterson of CSI.
Yes.
I thought he was great as Will Graham. Just the fact that for him to really get into that mindset, for him to do his job, it seems like he really needs to go into a very dark, horrible place for him to be able to do his job. And especially with Peterson, it shows in his face and the way his body language is that this is a guy who's seen some really bad stuff.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because in my opinion, his Will Graham, like, let's talk about what's about Hannibal, but the Will Graham character is awesome as well, and the different takes on him are interesting in and of themselves.
Right.
He, like, that performance, that's the only thing I almost didn't like about Manhunter. He was good, but I think it's because we've seen it crawls right up to the line of like parody of a haggard, worn out, smoking cop who's seen some shit.
Yeah.
What was that movie with the other bad one with Jennifer Lopez about a serial killer?
Oh, The Cell?
Yeah, that one.
No.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I think that's where like the line between Manhunter and The Cell is the line between this is good haggard detective stuff and this is completely ridiculous self-parody.
This is somebody's idea of what it should be as opposed to reality.
You feel like it should be like Leslie Nielsen pulling like smoking 10 cigarettes at once. You know,
I picked a bad week to kick
and then shaving off his
heroin.
stubble. Yeah, shaving off his stubble, and then there's more haggard stubble under the haggard stubble. Stubble has stubble. You know?
I definitely agree, Mike. I mean, it's William Peterson, and he's, it was a little weird for me seeing Grissom as Will Graham, so that was a struggle. And I did feel like he overplayed it a little bit. Like, I felt like Hugh Dancy's version of Will Graham is much more nuanced and subtle and interesting, but it's William Peterson, so.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you got to give him the credit.
Yeah,
and in the words of Calvin Harris, it was acceptable in the 80s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is it was the 80s, and what can you do?
It's a different time.
It was a different time.
It was the 80s and it was Michael Mann. What the hell would you expect?
Yeah.
But Brian Cox is Hannibal.
Yes, I was going to get into it next. Brian Cox is Hannibal Lecter. He is probably my favorite Lecter. Sorry to all those who like Anthony Hopkins and Mads Mikkelsen, but I love Brian Cox as Lecter.
Did you hear how offended Lindsay was? Really?
I mean, okay, but
Okay, Mac, I think we've all. Why would you say that is?
yes, everyone's entitled to their opinion.
Even if it's wrong. No.
And
I'm kidding.
Of course, this is based on me not having really had a chance to see Hannibal yet, but once I see it, I'm sure I'll have a change. But yeah, this episode is going to be you selling me on Hannibal, but we can get into that later.
All right.
I
to be sold, buddy.
I like Brian Cox just because this, for me, compared to what we would see with Lecter and Clarice Starling, Will Graham is someone that Lecter wants to destroy, seeing as how this is the guy that put him into that prison cell. And so here he's sort of doing kind of a bait and switch. We see Lecter kind of playing in like, okay, sure, I'll help you, whatever. But then at the same time, he's using this opportunity to communicate with the killer to sort of make Graham's life as much hell as possible. And so that animosity, I mean, even in Brett Ratner's Red Dragon, which we'll get into later, that relationship as far as between Ed Norton and Hopkins just doesn't feel as tense as, say, what we see with Cox and Peterson.
No, definitely.
Yeah, that's a good case. And it's kind of weird just because Cox stands out so much. I can't.
Right.
I almost have trouble getting over the novelty of the Super Troopers guy being Hannibal.
Give me the goddamn soap.
Evil shenanigans. But yeah, it kind of works because, like as you say, Mac, it's weird. It's kind of a schlubby kind of take on Hannibal Lecter, which is bizarre, but the mental sophistication, you're right, in how he just so thoroughly screws with him. Manhunter might be up there with most one-time Hannibal Lecter ever screwed with one of his antagonists. And it's interesting that this starts the trend, which we can talk about with the entire Hannibal Lecter franchise, I guess. Is he ever the leading man?
No, Brian Cox? No, he's usually a supporting guy.
Yeah, that's kind of it. That's one of the big themes of the whole franchise is he needs someone to play off. He needs someone to be fascinated by and to be fascinated with him. And I don't know, why do you think that is? Because, he's supposed to be this supreme, masterful, manipulative, sophisticated, I'm thinking on a level you can't comprehend. I have mysterious thought. It's all very vampire-y. Again, I keep coming back to that.
Yeah.
So why, if he's so much of a character, why does he never just carry his own thing?
Because I think a lot of it is, if you want a successful character, you need to have the character's foil. You always need to have the other side of the coin that plays off of that character. I don't think Hannibal would be as interesting if he was just kind of hanging around killing people at random.
Imagine if Professor Moriarty wasn't as good as Conan Doyle made him out to be. It would be pretty boring for Sherlock to go against someone both inferior as far as mentally and physically.
Right. And that happens a couple times in the Sherlock series where you're just like, wow, that was, really easy for him to figure out. And, everything is kind of straightforward. But, having somebody who's on the same level, I think you refer to that person as his antagonist, which is a good way of describing it. Having that play of, that internal game of chess between the two. It's Batman and Joker. It's Hannibal and Will Graham, or Hannibal and Clarice Starling. And you never know who's going to win this round. So I don't think Hannibal would be nearly as, he would just be a fancy pompous ass who eats people. I mean, that would probably be all he is otherwise.
Or you'd end up with something like American Psycho, which, almost ends up being a self-parody, but then it's a self-aware self-parody where, Christian Bale basically just stepped up and saved the entire project, I think. But something like American Psycho, where you have the singular character who's, kind of a punchline, definitely a punchline, but still supposed to be that kind of vampiric, sophisticated, brutal sociopath.
And the closest we get to an antagonist in American Psycho would be Willem Dafoe, but he's probably only in it for 10, 15 minutes?
I know,
he's not in it for very long.
Yeah,
I keep forgetting he was in that, which is baffling. Like Willem Dafoe, how do you miss him?
Yeah.
It's how weird that story is. But yeah, Sherry, I think you're right to say that, there's, it's always like that, isn't there? There's a Sherlock and Moriarty. The entire Dracula, originally Bram Stoker. I've forgotten.
He's got Van Helsing.
Van Helsing, yeah.
Yeah. And there's always, and it's almost like a two-man con game, the way the sales pitch works. So like the characters are both so enthusiastic for each other that the audience is convinced to be enthusiastic about them in the same way that they are for each other. You know what I mean?
It was in the, I forgot, I think it was The Final Solution was the short story where Holmes and Moriarty fought at like Reichenbach Falls.
Yeah, and they fall off the cliff and
and
he tried to kill them.
It was Sherlock Holmes who said that he views the relationship between him and Moriarty as like a casual chess game.
That's exactly it. It's always that chess mind game.
And so Hannibal Lecter might be, not quite equal to Moriarty in cultural impact, but I think for the decades that he's existed, same kind of thing, same kind of way. And fascinating for the same reasons. But it does take that sell. Where you have to have the character that's obsessed with her. Sherry, was it you that said, otherwise he just comes off as this pompous joke?
Yeah, exactly. He's just a sick guy who eats people. That's
right. So it's a great sell, but it's part of the sell.
Right.
But okay, so Manhunter, and then of course
we cannot leave out Francis Dollarhide, played by Tom Noonan, out of the discussion either, because he was just absolutely frightening. I was legitimately scared of this character when I first saw Manhunter. Probably when I was in 14, 15 years old, like right after Hannibal came out, I saw Manhunter, and I absolutely loved Tom Noonan's performance.
It's always good to have that villain that can just scare the pants right off of you.
And he is so intimidating, yet he's got that very soft, very delicate voice, which is just another wonderful
contrast
contrast
to the
character.
It's calm, quiet, very, unassuming almost, which is Dollarhide's biggest attribute, is he's very unassuming until he's not. And then you realize, oh my God, this guy could kill me very easily.
And that's interesting too, because Dexter famously, the direction that it took was that, he was a serial killer, hunted other serial killers, and I guess that's maybe Hannibal's, am I right in saying this, contribution to this whole genre, is that it's not two people who are obsessed with each other, it's a triangle, it's a triumvirate. It is
a love triangle.
Yeah. and that's kind of been, as far as I can remember, consistent throughout the series, is that there's the two, self-obsessed antagonists, but unlike Batman and the Joker, unlike Van Helsing and Dracula, unlike Holmes and Moriarty, their focus is on each other because of their focus is on some other horrible monster.
Yeah, one character is using another as a means to an end to get the other character.
Right. They're all playing each other.
Yeah. And
It's like
that performance was the best third monster performance in the series, because we'll get into it later, but
yeah,
I thought that Buffalo Bill's a joke. He's played garishly, he's played ridiculously, and that's how a lot of the third antagonist, the third partners in the Hannibal series was too, is that they were these outlandish, they almost were like Batman villains sometimes. Oh my God, it was so great. Like 5 episodes into the series, I was like, when does the one with bees come? And then like 10 episodes later, there was the one with the bees.
Yep.
Yes, but let's not get back into the TV series. We're talking about the films here. You keep departing, Michael.
Sorry. Okay. Mac, so, yeah. Manhunter, for some reason, it wasn't the one that had the cultural impact, and it wasn't the one that made the character huge, but yeah, I think we all kind of convinced each other that it's
good in its own right.
A couple of different, that's got a lot to recommend it.
And let alone a decent supporting cast. You've got Joan Allen, you got Steve Lang always playing the Weasley character that I love seeing him as, but now that he's always playing military roles now all of a sudden, which still strikes me as weird. You have the late Dennis Farina as Jack Crawford, who I thought was pretty good in here as well. And a little bit of trivia, Frank Faison, who plays, he has a small role in Manhunter as a police officer, but he plays Barney, the asylum attendant to Hannibal Lecter in the next 3 Hannibal films.
No, yeah.
I completely missed that.
Yeah, so you've got one
the
actor who's been in
one.
Yeah, he's been in like the first 4 Hannibal Lecter films. Frankie Faison is his name, and he's a good actor. I've seen him in a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool. I did not catch that at all.
All right, now we can move into Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
I can't. I am no Anthony Hopkins. I can't.
No, I don't think. Who can make that noise? Can any of us make that noise?
That's the best I can do.
This part of the podcast is going to sound filthy.
And speaking of a director coming out of nowhere, Jonathan Demme, who directed this, the films he did before this was True Stories, which was a comedy documentary with David Byrne from the Talking Heads, and Married to the Mob. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, this shot him right into, like, the hot director picture after this. Jodie Foster, absolutely great as Clarice Starling. She had that right level of naivety and very green to the job that she was going to be partaking in. And so she goes through a great arc of just realizing what this job is going to require of her.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. It's almost completely different. They play the, I guess we'll call it the protagonist, the Hannibal Lecter adversary.
Yeah.
You're right. She has the most like human arc of the whole thing, and it's striking how much it is different from Will before. Because you're right, and it's like a completely different playoff character with a completely different story. Like she's not even that tormented, I think is her secret. He's almost like trying to convince her to fuck herself. I mean, I guess Hannibal Lecter's always doing that. He's convincing people to fuck themselves.
Yeah, well, he has the ability to reach into your psyche and pull out what you might never consider as being a really huge part of your life. He will go into that little tormented piece of your soul and pull it out and make you focus on it. And that's all you can think about. And that's where his ability comes in with his psychological background or whatever, and is able to really kind of screw people up.
And the way
regardless of how tormented they actually are.
And the way he subtly pushes her throughout the very film, even when they first meet, there's that one line that he says where he's almost impersonating Jodie Foster's accent, like, "Are you
Yes.
trying to
Right.
dissect me with this blunt little tool?" And it's like that's his way of like messing with her slowly, just trying to get into her head, trying to get through her
Yep.
her, I guess you could say, mental armor that she's hiding from or what she's running from for all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, but it's most interesting because I always saw that character and I always saw that relationship as the biggest con in all these stories. Like the Will character, the trick with him, like as we just discussed in his different incarnations, he is tortured and he is messed up and he kind of is from the same dark place. Whereas Clarice Starling, you're right, Sherry, barely is, and he's trying to convince her to think she's more messed up than she actually is. It's the biggest, it's the most of a con, in the series, I think.
Yeah. He skillfully plays her like a little fiddle.
Like a little lamb.
Like a little lamb, exactly.
I still love this one too. This is the big one. This is the famous one.
This is the one that swept the Oscars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember when horror movies used to do that?
Right.
Well, the great thing about the fact that Anthony Hopkins, didn't he win Best Actor?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was not actually in the movie for that long.
No, he was in there for like 20 minutes. He wasn't in it for
Exactly.
very long at all, no.
No, and he won Best Actor, which I always
Exactly.
thought was amazing.
And that's what surprised me about Red Dragon when I read it. And I felt like it was a lot like Dracula in that this huge, almost mythological character, whether it's Dracula or whether it's Hannibal Lecter, they're not really in the books that much.
You don't want to overexpose the monster. It's a lot like Heath
Right.
Ledger in The Dark Knight. You don't want too much of him.
The Jaws effect.
Right.
You don't show the shark until the
Moby
last
Dick.
half hour.
Moby Dick.
Moby Dick.
So,
Stop it, Mike.
Mike,
Like doing something?
You were giggling. Like,
you're always doing.
I'm always plotting my devious schemes. That was kind of interesting, although, Mac, I hope we don't want to wander off too far, but I did, because of the whole Joker thing and because I had to stop and not read, like, half the things that Alan Moore is famous for writing.
Oh, The Killing Joke?
Yeah, I read The Killing Joke, and I had read V for Vendetta earlier this year, and that's interesting because that's one of the most famous takes on the character, and that's responsible for the great vampire that Heath Ledger was in the Batman movie, in his version of this character. But at the same time, it's kind of the opposite approach. That's the weird thing with Alan Moore. It's like you get saturated with the monster. It's like he is the protagonist, and the monsters and the weirdos and like the mythological, super powerful figure.
It's like the prequel trilogy.
Have all the lines in those versions.
it's like the what?
It's like the prequel trilogy with Darth Vader.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Too much. Way too much, though. That was a case of fail.
Yeah.
But we won't go into Star Wars right now.
No. And speaking of crazy characters, imagine being Ted Levine and trying to get work after this movie from playing Buffalo Bill.
No.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was just about to say that's one of the things, even about Hopkins. He's, it's great, it's compelling. You remember every single sound he makes, and every single gesture that he has in this movie. But it's still like he went pretty hard, And the movie that has, him and then Buffalo Bill in it, Silence of the Lambs gets pretty goofy at times, and not in ways that I think are super flattering. I know this is the big one. This is the one that won all the Oscars. But after having seen all these other takes on the character, it's, I think maybe going that hard, going that flamboyant is difficult.
Goodbye, horses.
Puts lotion on its skin. Yeah.
Lotion in the basket.
This is terrible. I had a hard time rewatching Silence of the Lambs because of the friggin' dog.
Oh, the dog! Oh,
I was like, no, not Precious. Don't hurt Precious. I knew she wasn't going to, but like, oh, it's horrible. I'm such a big softie when it comes to animals in films. I cannot handle an animal getting hurt. People kill them
I'm
all.
right there with you. I could care less about the humans. It's like, you got yourself into the mess, so you deserve whatever you get. But the animals...
They didn't mean to. They didn't know.
They didn't know. So don't put the dog in the basket and whatever. Just don't do it.
Don't.
No dogs, no lotion, no weirdness.
Dog's sitting there crying. I'm like, the doggy needs help. Forget the girl who's in the pit. Screw her.
Right. And then
even though she was actually really nice and kept the dog afterwards anyway.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of those like rules that is it a rule or is it the other way around that it's a rule that don't kill the animals, especially in horror movies. This is divisive horror topic, I think. Like if you save the animal, you're kind of making a.
I thought that's more action movies.
Yeah.
Like Independence Day when the dog jumps into the thing under the tunnel and is saved.
There have been a few instances in horror, like the one off the top of my head I can think of is Return of the Living Dead. Zombies break into a pet shop, and one of the zombies is chasing the dog. And yeah, and fortunately, the heroes who are driving a truck just crash into the zombie, saving the dog. So,
yeah.
But that's actually a really interesting moment in Silence of the Lambs was when what happened? She got the dog, right?
She lured the dog down into the pit. The dog fell into the pit and got hurt, and she was holding on the dog.
And Buffalo Bill started to say like,
"Don't hurt her."
He started to freak out a little bit. She kind of got him where he lives with the dog. So, obviously that's a huge theme in life and in movies and everything. Like, don't fuck with people's animals because that's their heart, that's their soul. So, or do if you
want to get in a bad situation.
If you want to she made Buffalo Bill vulnerable.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, that's mine. Hi, guy.
Oh, we won't do anything to him.
And I'm not sure that anybody else could have made him really vulnerable in that way.
She was thinking it through. Of course, she should never have helped a guy put the thing into the truck in the first place.
I mean, really, let's talk about that.
Every girl knows not to.
Although
one thing,
that trick with the cast was actually based on Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy, he used to do that. Was it Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer?
Oh, it was Ted Bundy. Yeah,
Ted Bundy.
There was a documentary on serial killers that came with the DVD of Silence of the Lambs, and that's the reference they were referring to.
That's what I thought it was Jeffrey Dahmer, but I did catch that with the cast. I was like, a serial killer. In fact, every time I'm in the grocery parking lot and I see grocery store parking lot, if I ever see somebody who's having trouble with things, I always go back in the store and say, somebody needs your help out there. Unless it's like a tiny little old lady and there's nobody else around.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I'm like, maybe there's somebody hiding behind her car waiting to jump out. She's in cahoots.
Right. She's the decoy.
Yeah, the twist would be the tiny old lady is the most dangerous one of all.
Yes.
That's right.
Into an oven.
And going back to Silence of the Lambs, this also too had a pretty crazy cast. You had Anthony Heald, who played the asylum supervisor, Dr. Chilton, who I've seen in a dozen other things.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Glenn, really good as Jack Crawford. Especially after seeing him in Daredevil as Stick. I can't help but see him right now. And probably some of the weirdest cameos I've seen in a movie. Like Roger Corman, the King of the B movies, he plays the FBI director.
I hadn't checked that twice. What?
Yeah, that's Roger Corman, man.
Oh, man.
And in the scene where they have Lecter in the cell in I guess it's in the courthouse, when Anthony Heald goes in there to apprehend Clarice Starling, one of the agents accompanying him is George Romero.
Wow.
And it's like, it's like, oh my god, that's really George Romero. And then last but not least, one of the guards of Lecter in the courthouse is Charles Napier, who you might remember from the Herbert episode of Star Trek.
No.
Yeah, he's one of the space hippies.
Wow.
I remember, Matt, you had to tell me how famous that guy was, because I forget what the context was that I recently encountered that random, ancient, bizarre episode of Star Trek. And you're like, no, this is a whole guy. He does the whole thing. He's usually military characters. He's usually car bosses. And in this one, he is the fayest hippie that exists.
Playing like the most far out mandolin you've ever seen.
Far out.
The original Star Trek known pretty well for goofy sets and goofy props, but the instruments in that episode have to have their own like special little medal of special Star Trek goofiness. But okay, let's not get onto the subject of instruments in Star Trek.
Okay, now we get to evidence as to why Ridley Scott doesn't always make a great movie, and that's Hannibal.
Yes.
Yeah. Not really sure where they were trying to go with this one.
Yeah, this one had a lot of tonal inconsistencies. 1 minute it's grand guignol, the next minute it's serious horror drama, then it's comedy. It doesn't know, it can't maintain a decent tone throughout its being.
Yeah, I kind of have the same reaction. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be finding funny.
I mean, don't get me wrong, the dinner scene with Ray Liotta is absolutely hilarious, but this is the wrong movie.
That's my favorite scene in the entire movie.
Yeah, can we just, for those listening at home, if we have any of those, who wants to describe this scene to someone who has not seen it?
No, don't describe it. Just let them watch the movie and find out for themselves.
You should watch the movie. And if you've seen Hannibal the series, there is a reference to that scene in the 3rd season.
Correct.
In Italy, and it was a really, really well done reference to it. But definitely, I will challenge you to challenge people at home to sit down, watch this scene, and not laugh. But at the same time, you're going to be laughing and yet feel disgusted at yourself because you're laughing at this scene. It is dark humor at its finest.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think it was intended to be darkly humorous, but it is.
No, and this was probably, I guess, between the three, whether it's Red Dragon, Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, what have you, this is the one that has at least probably the least from the book itself, because they, compared to the book, they really toned down the incest between the Verger siblings. They got rid of the romantic relationship between Lecter and Clarice, which, I mean, it obviously shows now, going back to the book, how much Thomas Harris wanted this book to be so bad that they wouldn't make a movie out of it, and yet they made a movie out of it.
Not just one movie.
No, I haven't even seen Hannibal Rising. I can't bring myself to watch it.
No, don't. It's a waste of your time.
Yeah, you forget. I think we can. We're running a little long, so it's good that we can talk about Hannibal Rising for 2 seconds and then completely forget it, which is like movie. It's the one where Hannibal is basically regresses to a cut rate Patrick Bateman, and gets a bizarre backstory where it's like he has this tragic past or something.
Supposed to try and explain him, which is, I think the worst idea ever. It's like the Darth Vader thing all over again. We don't need an explanation.
Yeah.
We really don't.
Yeah. Which I have to give a shout out, especially since this is a horror show. Personal favorite unintentionally funny movie is Bram Stoker's Dracula. I have no idea why.
Yes.
But
it's hysterical.
Yeah, with the armor that was like
a puppet show.
Yeah,
shadow puppets. It was awesome.
Yeah, and what's one of the many hilarious misfires in that movie was they did the same thing. They had the same bad idea, is you go back and create some kind of forlorn, tragic, sympathetic backstory for one of these monsters, and that just never seems to end well.
Yeah.
No, Dracula was supposed to be like some satanic evil that the good and righteous had to destroy. He wasn't supposed to be part of like some love schmaltzy relationship.
Yeah,
Mm-mm. No.
yeah. And I think we
Lathy
already
Taylor was a bad ass. He was something you didn't mess with. Didn't invade his country, and unless you wanted a pole shoved up somewhere not pleasant. And I thought Bram Stoker's Dracula really kind of failed there.
Speaking of Gary Oldman, I freaking loved him as Mason Verger, though.
Yes. Sorry, I just clapped. I hope that didn't mess up the microphone. He was awesome as Mason Verger.
He was crazy as Mason Verger, and just I couldn't believe how the makeup obviously was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And that was his request too. He talked to the makeup effects artist, and he said like, "Hey, can you do anything to like push my nose in and like keep my eyelid open?" It's like he really wanted to just mess himself up, and that's why I love Gary Oldman.
Yeah, I wanted to make it look like I actually did cut off my face and feed it to the dogs. Okay.
well, go hard or go home.
Exactly. And Gary Oldman is not a quitter.
Oh no.
No, never.
Yeah.
Okay, what are your thoughts on Julianne Moore as Clarice Starling this time around?
Well, I think, Jodie Foster she took over her character, and really, I think she created such. I mean, we all said the same thing about Hannibal with Anthony Hopkins. He created this character and made it his own, but at the same time, maybe it would take another actress who really has the chops to kind of redefine the Clarice character, but Julianne, what's her name? Sorry,
Julianne Moore, good actress,
Julianne Moore
but
was
just
not
not the right role.
for it. No,
Right, exactly. She is
She's
great
too
in other
beautiful.
movies. She's too beautiful.
Too self-assured.
Yeah, and I just felt like her version it's like a parody almost. It's because the Jodie Foster version is so.
Yeah. like a little deer or a puppy in the woods, and that's
Right.
Or a lamb lost in the
Lamb.
and right that was supposed to be the head screw. That was the whole point. That's what Anthony Hopkins Hannibal was trying to misconvince her of.
And we never see it again after Silence of the Lambs, at least as far as I know. I don't think we see it again.
Yeah.
That reference.
It's so interesting how many dynamics you can have like this. I think that's one of the cool things about Hannibal Lecter that we're discovering. You'll discover it if you read books, see the movies, and in this conversation, is he's such a versatile character in this world that he can have more than one Batman.
Yeah.
Who is such a great character that it gets multiple Sherlocks or multiple Batmen?
Yeah.
Only Hannibal.
Yeah.
Only Hannibal.
It's like Hannibal, and that's another cool take on the character, is that Hannibal is the villain technically. He is the villain, but he's the one with the rogues gallery. He's the one with this group of, one or two, three characters, but possible with so many takes on those characters too, I guess. He's the one with the gallery of wacky adversaries. And he's the one who fights a new one each week, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we pretty much addressed like the rest of the cast, like Ray Liotta, but the one actor, Giancarlo Giannini, who plays Inspector Pazzi, I really like his character just because here you have this cop who was mixed up in a famous, manhunt for an Italian serial killer, and then here he is coercing, or at least conversing with one of the most infamous serial killers and not realizing it.
Yeah. I always confuse his name with Pazzi, with the Patsy. He's a Patsy.
Right.
I wish I had had time to do research into the name itself and actually see if there's a connection to the term Patsy and then the family name Pazzi. And because he is basically just a giant patsy where
Yeah.
I feel so bad for him. He's the one character that I really actually truly feel bad for when his end comes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know what you were trying to do. You were in desperate straits. You were trying to, make a life for you and your new wife and all of this stuff. And obviously being an Italian policeman doesn't have a great salary. And he was kind of already not disowned, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Demerited.
Demerited, yeah, in the police force. And so this was his big chance to really kind of reclaim his life. And unfortunately, he picked the wrong guy to go after.
Yeah.
And then the rest is, history, hanging above an Italian courtyard with his guts hanging out.
Yeah. He's the most Jonathan Harkery character in this group.
Yes, he is.
Mhm.
He is so Jonathan Harker. Just do.
Yeah. And that's another element you can throw into the mix. Is it's okay to have a completely unfortunate bastard sometimes.
Yes. Just, oh, you poor thing, you were in the wrong place at the very wrong time.
Yeah. And it's funny because we just agreed that Clarice Starling is a bad, unfortunate bastard, but you can have an unfortunate bastard. This is a very.
But she's one who's kind of more aware of her situation and her surroundings
Yeah.
than Patsy was.
Yeah, she's like if you gave John Van Helsing a little more of a coming of age story, which is pretty cool. I would be interested in learning how the hell Van Helsing became who Van Helsing was supposed to be. That's one of those.
Oh, you never seen the movie Van Helsing?
No, I haven't.
No.
Barrette. The hair barrette. That's all I could focus on in that movie. But never mind. That's just no.
Yeah, so I
And-
guess Silence of the Lambs, the movie, is the exception that proves the rule. It's the only time one of these sophisticated characters kind of gets this kind of rising, coming of age, classic little, naive hero's journey, and it actually works. And I think that a lot of that is, I think we can agree, is down to Jodie Foster just being awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's a hard thing to do, but they did it. So
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Be interesting to see if they try and bring. I know that the studio has some really tight rights on her character.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if they're able to somehow get around that. And I know they tried to do that with the what's her name, Lass character in the
Miriam Lass,
series.
yeah.
Miriam Lass. They tried to do that with her. But if they could actually bring one that's a direct homage to Clarice and see if they which actress they could choose to
Right.
really portray her at the same level as Jodie. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Which would be pretty damn cool all around. So what the one we haven't gotten to yet, the Red Dragon.
Yes. Probably one of Brett Ratner's better movies. Don't get me wrong, I like After the Sunset because it was cool to see Pierce Brosnan in a comedic performance. And of course,
I liked it too.
I liked it too. And who doesn't love Rushmore? The first one, at least.
Yes, that's true.
There's more than one Rushmore?
No, Rush Hour. Sorry, Rush
Hour.
Rush Hour. There you go.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
knew what you were talking about, even though.
Totally different things.
Thank you.
Yes, the
Those
original.
are about the most two different movies that you can make in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And yet I knew what he was saying.
I was close, just that one syllable.
Chris Tucker,
Yep.
That one time you found him appealing.
Yeah. Oh, Fifth Element.
Fifth Element, yeah.
Friday. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay,
I don't
we're off track.
Yeah.
not.
Okay, so
Anyway.
what are our thoughts on Ed Norton as Will Graham? Do you think? I think he was too young.
Yeah,
Thumbs
I
down.
love Ed Norton, but he did not do a
Thumbs
fantastic
down.
job,
No.
unfortunately.
Yeah, he brought it, but I don't know if he brought the right thing to the party.
Yeah.
It was, and Red Dragon is weird too because it's visually very luscious. I think that's something that we should. We should use the word luscious more in general, just in life.
Yeah.
But we can definitely use it describing most Hannibal stuff. I think that Manhunter was that weird exception where things got drab, but everything else, part of the Dracula thing, part of the Joker thing is, the garishness is a huge part of what makes the character what he is. And Manhunter was like the least of that, but Red Dragon is definitely fun to look at, if nothing else.
Ironically enough, Red Dragon and Manhunter both share the same cinematographer, Dante Spinotti.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't be something, at least I would guess. Maybe the two most visually different takes on this whole mythos, this whole Hannibal Lecter character that there are. Red Dragon's not terrible, but it's almost like an action movie, which is weird.
And for those who are sticklers for those who want movies to be more like the book, this is the one I guess you want to go with, because this is a lot of it directly from the novel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I both slightly remember and generally understand, is that this is the one where you actually had the book to movie translation, at least faithfully, and the story points started and ended at the same time and had about the same arc.
Yeah.
Just a lot more punch fight arrowing.
And to be honest, I prefer the climax of Manhunter compared to the book and Red Dragon, just because, it's Iron Butterflies playing in the background. That's just perfect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of what I think we're starting to... Because it's weird, because it's Anthony Hopkins again, but the character seems to be trying to be portrayed so differently in this one that it's almost like it's almost becomes a completely different performance. Like he's still sucking his teeth and speaking in that slow Anthony Hopkins way, but he's almost like an action villain.
Yeah.
I guess
because now you have the relationship of antagonism between Graham and Lecter, whereas you kind of had the, I guess, somewhat rite of passage between Clarice and Lecter in Sounds of the Lamb. So now you're trying to go for the exact opposite of that relationship. And for Lecter, I've never really associated Hopkins really playing that kind of sinister villain as opposed to the kind of villain he played in Sounds of the Lambs.
Yeah. It's like Hannibal Lecter isn't an evil ninja. You know what I mean? It's like actually in if we go back to Dracula or any most of these characters. Sometimes the Joker's physically dangerous, but the Joker's been so many damn things over the years that you could say sometimes he's most anything. But I think the whole trick is that I think the best Batman stuff is, and it's kind of like the same way as Dracula too, is Dracula doesn't beat you up in a fight.
Right.
You don't see him coming. He's
Right.
already steps
He's already
ahead.
there.
Yeah. He moves mysteriously. He comes out of fucking nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that I think that's probably the traits shared most by good versions of this character, the best versions.
He's more the Kingpin. He's not Bullseye. He's not the one that he's not the one that does the dirty work.
Right. And kind of seeing him try to be the one who rampages around doing the dirty work.
It's very weird.
Yeah.
It's like seeing a turtle outside of its shell. It's like, what you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was the same thing. If going back to episode 1, Freddy Krueger, different character. I think not, but in the same ballpark. Very different take, very distinct performance. But I remember that it was the second movie where Friday the 13th New Nightmare. There we go.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Yes.
2. It's the same thing happens. So all of a sudden, Freddy's not sneaking up on you in some convoluted way in your dreams and killing you 7 times before you know you're dead. He hulks out and he becomes this monster who runs around punching people at a party.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the weirdest thing to see. It's like a turtle out of the shell. And you're using one of these. Yeah, and it's so much less scary to just see something go on a rampage. I think there's reasons that Friday the 13th got funny pretty fast. is
Right.
because if you had this monster going around punching people's heads off, it's hard not to get funny.
Well, I think
Especially-
that's back to what we were talking about earlier, where the monster that's scariest is the monster you don't see. The one
Exactly.
that's in the dark, in the shadows. You know it's there, but you don't know how to defend against it.
Mhm.
And that's also part of the reason why this film's version of Francis Dollar High doesn't work with me as well, because what I liked about Tom Noonan was that he was kind of that sympathetic monster. He knew what he was doing, and he wanted to try and be something he wanted to be somewhat humane and human. But yet here we have Ray Fiennes, who was too handsome for the character to begin with.
Yes, he
And
was.
then you have him eating a painting to be the biblical red dragon, and it's like, I know it may have worked for the novel, but for the movie, it just comes off for me as kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's rather jarring when you see it visually. And so when I read the book, Red Dragon, I admit it wasn't because Hannibal wasn't really in it as much as I thought he was going to be. I was kind of bored. But that moment where the same with Dracula and Moby Dick pulls it off, so that's fine. But the same with Dracula. So FYI, don't read Dracula, watch the movie. But even in the book, the moment where he eats that piece of paper, I was blown away because it was like, who does that? What is happening?
Crazy people. That's who.
Why? What's going on? So so whoever's playing it and
It's hard
whatever.
to work with that.
It's hard to work with, but it's
I guess you could say the only way I'm able to kind of justify him eating the painting is his character is very orally fixated.
true.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
All of his kind of understanding of the world comes through his mouth
And all of his
teeth.
insecurity.
Yes, his insecurity because of his his teeth and
The little mark on his lip, yeah.
the mark on his lip, which hair lip, whatever, however extreme they make it, whether it's, I haven't read the book, but like just from seeing the movie and seeing the TV show and just kind of figuring out this character, he has some serious mommy issues. And a lot of that is oral fixation, and him eating the painting is his way of kind of coming to terms with this monster that's inside of him and trying to face it down.
And also, I think he's trying to, that's how he's going to really become it. He's literally absorbing.
Exactly. He's ingesting. So like Hannibal ingests people, like the old cannibal thought, you ingest your enemies to gain their power. He's ingesting Blake's painting to gain the power of the dragon and really harness it for himself.
To complete his metamorphosis.
Exactly. Right. And then we'll go into metamorphosis later.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly. That's how he kind of completes his changing, or his becoming, as Hannibal likes to call it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But one thing about his mouth and just that whole part of the story, I never thought he looked that bad. It's like, why are you, yes, you're upset about it because you're crazy. I understand. But
it's an internalized hatred. It's really, I think, a lot, again, with the mommy issues, it's an internalized hatred that he's kind of latched onto from childhood. And it has expanded and blown out of proportions. And you could almost say that the dragon is his way of handling and dealing with it, which is kind of an overkill on dealing with something. But
dude, it's not that bad. Relax.
Well, that's why when he asks, I'm completely forgetting her name, the woman that he falls in love with.
Reba, Reba, not McIntyre.
Oh yes, Reba McIntyre.
Reba. McLean.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Is that?
Yes.
I can't remember.
I think so. Reba McLean.
Wait, the actress?
No. The character
Yeah.
that he falls in love with, and he asks her, what does she see when she touches his face finally?
Yeah, the blind girl. Yeah, Emily Watson, the actress. Yeah.
Yeah, and she says, well, actually, no, not when she touches his face, but when he asks her what other people say about him, he seems very surprised when she's like, yeah, they think you're handsome. And he's like, what now? What you talking about, Willis?
Huh?
Yeah, so that brings into the mirror shards and not being able to look at himself directly.
And one final note before we close out for the film. I was really disappointed with Philip Seymour Hoffman as Freddie Lowndes. Compared to Stephen Lang, I thought this was a very dull role for someone like Hoffman to play.
Yeah. Agreed. I think
it was unremarkable.
Not to speak ill of the dead, but just his performance in this film.
Yeah, it was unremarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a very weird thing to say about anything. It's like
it's just Seymour Hoffman.
All right. It's like that moment earlier in the conversation when we forgot William Dafoe existed in one of these movies.
Willem, not William. Willem. That's a pet peeve of mine.
But yeah, I think it was a bad fit. I think, one of the things about Freddie Lowndes, whether it's played by, what's his name? The guy in, Stephen Lang. Or, what's her name?
I actually don't know her name. She's
good. The redhead.
Yeah,
the redhead.
In the series.
They're both.
Freddie Lowndes is a woman in the TV show. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that.
We'll explain that. Yeah.
We'll explain that.
Yep.
You get that they are journalists in quotation marks, but they are not the cleanest, most solid, moral-centered people. And I think that comes out a lot more, especially in Manhunter. And the television series a lot more than it does with Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance, because it's Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it's like I can't say anything other than it's just a bad fit, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. So as long as we're summing up the movies, I've been listening to us talk here. We have said some really remarkable actors were the smallest part of such a big thing in all of these films. And, Hopkins is the one that pop culture remembers, but I think it's pretty strong how much talent has been used in making these things, even when they don't quite work.
Right.
It's go hard or go home material. And a lot of people have come through it, and a lot of stars have come through it and gone hard, and sometimes gone home.
Yeah.
And it's obviously a testament to the power of Hannibal and the whole narrative, and everybody's drawn to it, whether they're the best fit for the character that they're playing or not. It's like Hannibal has made his mark.
Yeah, and so I think we're kind of in agreement. Red Dragon is watchable, but kind of weird and schlocky.
Yep.
The Hannibal and Hannibal Rising are just bad, although sometimes fun, because go hard or go home. Silence of the Lambs, everyone knows it. That's the pop culture landmark. Still good, but a little hard. And if anyone's listening to this, seriously, watch Manhunter.
Yes.
Yes.
It is a beautiful little jewel in the Hannibal series that I was not aware of before we actually did this planning for this session.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth watching.
It's definitely surprising.
Mm-hmm.
And compelling as hell, even when it's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.